want to start with a scenario that I think everyone has experienced, no matter how together they are. You're in some high stakes situation, maybe a heated argument or a sudden crisis at work, and your brain just, it flatlines. You know you're intelligent, you know you have a vocabulary, but all of a sudden you're just operating on pure reactive instinct.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe 2 hours later, you're looking back thinking, why on earth did I say that? Who even was that person?
It's that universal morning after regret. But for anxiety, it's that moment you realize you weren't the one driving the car.
Exactly. And that feeling of not being behind the wheel is really the core of what we're digging into today. We are looking at the architecture of fear, not just as an emotion, but as a mechanism that physically and, well, spiritually hijacks human cognition.
Right.
We've got a fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive that blend psychological frameworks with some pretty heavy philosophical texts, specifically focusing on David Hawkins and his concept of consciousness levels.
Yeah, and it's a great stack because it moves us away from this idea that fear is just, a bad feeling we have to cope with. The sources argue that fear is actually a distinct physiological and mental state that fundamentally alters how we process reality. We're exploring how to move from being a victim of that state to becoming, a master of perception.
Master of perception. I like that, but let's be real. When the panic hits, mastery is usually the last thing on my mind.
Of course.
I was reading through the source material on the physiological effects, and it makes a pretty damning claim about our intelligence in those moments. It basically says that when fear enters the room, analytical thinking just jumps out the window.
It's not an exaggeration. The source describes it as a partial or often a total loss of rationality. Think about it like a computer system crashing.
A total loss.
Yeah. When you're in a state of high fear, the cortical processing, the part of you that can weigh pros and cons, see nuance, or even understand another person's perspective, it literally goes offline.
So when I look back at that argument and think I was acting like an idiot, it's because, functionally, I was.
In a way, yes. The source uses the phrase, believing the greatest nonsense. When you're in that fearful state, your critical filters just dissolve. You become really prone to believing rubbish misinformation, worst case scenarios, conspiracy theories about your own relationships.
And that creates a if I believe the rubbish like my boss hates me and I'm definitely getting fired, that just generates more fear.
Precisely. You believe the nonsense, which spikes the adrenaline, which further disables your rationality, which makes you believe even more nonsense. It's a spiral. And the text points out this leads to behavioral changes where you do things you would avoid by a wide margin if you were balanced.
That explains the text messages we shouldn't send.
It explains a lot of human history, actually. But there's a concept in the reading that I found really illuminating, the observational gap.
Right, this is the perspective of the outsider looking in.
Exactly. Imagine a third person watching you in that panic spiral. They aren't afraid. To them, the connections are obvious. They can see the solution sitting right there on the table.
But you can't see it.
The fearful person, you physically cannot see it. It's not that you're refusing to look. It's that your brain just isn't processing on that frequency.
It's like the sober friend at the bar trying to explain to the drunk friend why calling their ex is a bad idea.
That's a very apt analogy.
The drunk friend literally cannot process that logic.
The fearful person creates a separate reality. And this is where we run into trouble when we try to interact with others who are in that state. The sources introduce a term that I think is going to stick with people. Shoreless persuasion.
I highlighted that phrase 3 times. Shoreless persuasion. It sounds so poetic, but it describes something incredibly frustrating. It's an argument that just can't be won, right?
It's an argument without a destination. I mean, think about what a shore represents. It's solid ground, a landing spot. When you engage in shoreless persuasion with someone who's operating out of fear, there is no landing spot. They aren't looking for a resolution. They are looking for a discharge of energy.
So you're trying to use logic, which is a shore, and they were just out in the middle of a stormy ocean. The text is pretty harsh on this, saying it drags both parties down.
It does, and it categorizes the actors in a way that helps us spot this dynamic. You have the fearful actor, who is usually loud, accusing, and compelled to justify themselves.
Compelled is the key word there. It really feels like they have to prove they're right.
Because for them, being wrong feels like death. Their self-esteem is so disturbed by the fear that they have to project blame outward. If they start blaming you, they have to look at the internal terror, and that's just too painful.
Versus the conscious actor, who is, just quiet, a doormat.
Not at all. The conscious actor is quiet but strong. They end the dialogue in acceptance. They realize that trying to win against a terrified person is like trying to put out a fire with a calculator.
It's the wrong tool.
It's the wrong tool. They don't take the bait.
This leads us directly into the David Hawkins framework. We need to unpack this level 200 concept. I'll be honest, when I first read it, it felt a little, elitist. Like, I'm a level 400 and you're a lowly level 100.
It's so easy to misinterpret it as a hierarchy of better than, but it's really a measurement of capacity and perception. Hawkins posits that 200 is the critical threshold of integrity and courage.
Okay, so what does life look like above 200?
Above 200, you view the world as generally supportive. Kindness, integrity, taking responsibility. Those are baseline behaviors. You assume if someone disagrees with you, it's just a disagreement.
And below 200?
Below 200, the world is viewed as hostile. And this is key. Kindness is perceived as despicable weakness.
Wow.
If you are nice to someone operating below 200, they don't think, oh, what a nice person. They often think, this person is weak, I can exploit that, or they're trying to manipulate me.
That is the part that just blew my mind. The idea that peace creates suspicion.
Exactly. The source material warns us about the futility of trying to force change on someone in that state. You can't change their mind through war, or laws, or propaganda, or even re-education.
There was that analogy about quantum mechanics. I think this helps clear up the elitism concern a bit. It's not about intelligence, is it?
No, not at all. The source says you cannot teach high-level quantum theory to someone who isn't intellectually schooled for it.
Right.
It's not an insult to a toddler that they can't do calculus. They just don't have the hardware installed yet. Similarly, you cannot force a high consciousness perspective like unconditional forgiveness on someone whose internal operating system is wired for survival and attack.
They literally cannot hear what you're saying. It's a different language.
It's a different language.
Yeah.
And it creates a cultural clash, too. The text mentions that some mindsets view peace not as a goal, but as a sign of surrender. So if you come in waving a white flag, they see it as an invitation to conquer.
Okay, so we've established that fear makes us temporarily stupid, and arguing with fear is a shoreless trap. That's the diagnosis. I want to get to the cure, because the sources were surprisingly practical here. It wasn't just think happy thoughts.
No, not at all. It starts with the body. You have to reboot the hardware before you can update the software. The first instruction is shockingly literal. Breathe out your paranoids.
I love that phrasing, exhale your fears. But it's not just a casual sigh, is it?
No, it's described as a purge. The instruction is to keep blowing them out until not even a seed remains. You have to visualize the fear as a physical toxin like carbon dioxide or stress hormones and physically evacuate it from your lungs.
I actually tried this before the show, just sitting there and forcefully exhaling every time I had a stressful thought. It's weirdly effective.
It works because you are interrupting that feedback loop we talked about earlier. You are signaling to your body, we are flushing this out. And the source says something really interesting happens once you fully empty that vessel.
That the nonsense starts to look like nonsense again.
Yes. The logic returns. You look back at the thing that terrified you 5 minutes ago, and it seems small, almost funny. You wonder, why was I carrying that huge bag of rubbish?
The source also touches on exercise, which I think is worth a quick mention.
Right. Intensive exercise is the other side of that coin. It's a hormonal reset. It burns off the cortisol and adrenaline that accumulate from that below 200 stress. It delays aging, improves mood, but, fundamentally grounds you. It's very hard to maintain a complex paranoid illusion when you are sprinting up a hill. The body just takes over.
So, step 1 is biological. Breathe it out, sweat it out, get the brain back online. Step 2 is where we get into the mental shift. The source uses this visual of a rock to describe our problems.
Yeah, this is a perspective exercise. From a distance, when we are afraid, our problems look like massive, immovable boulders. They look like the end of the world.
But the advice isn't to run away from the rock.
No, it's to get closer. The text suggests that when you actually approach the problem, when you examine it without the panic filter, it reveals a sophisticated and digestible face.
It becomes a puzzle rather than a monster.
Exactly. But you have to shift your angle. And this brings us to probably the most powerful metaphor in the entire stack, the remote control.
I think this is the one that's going to trigger some people, to be honest. The source says we are holding the remote control for our own reality.
It is a challenging concept. The text asks, if you were watching a play you don't like, why are you still watching it? The implication being that we have the power to change the channel.
But I can hear the listener screaming at their phone right now. I didn't choose to get laid off. I didn't choose this. I can't change that channel.
And that is a completely valid reaction. But the source is making a very subtle distinction here. You might not control the external event, the car breaking down, but you absolutely control the narrative of the event. You control the channel of perception. Are you watching the I'm a victim and nothing ever goes right for me channel? Or are you watching the okay, this is a hassle, but I can handle it channel?
So it's less about magically changing the world and more about changing the lens.
It's about intention. The source says joy doesn't need a cause. It needs an intention. We have this backwards idea that we need to wait for something good to happen in order to feel good.
Right.
The source argues you intend the joy first, and your perception follows that.
Which is a perfect segue to the most metaphysical and I think maybe the most controversial part of this deep dive, the choice between lack and abundance.
The everything universe. It's the idea that the universe is basically a menu that contains every possible option. Joy, suffering, wealth, poverty, love, isolation. It's all there.
And the claim is if I'm experiencing lack, it's because I ordered it.
In a spiritual sense, yes. The text calls it the not. If you are overwhelmed by what is missing, it is because you have tuned your receiver to the frequency of missing. You've selected lack from the menu.
Okay, play devil's advocate with me here. Isn't that just toxic positivity? Telling someone who is really struggling, hey, you ordered this suffering. It feels a lot like victim blaming.
It absolutely can feel that way if you look at it superficially. But the source anticipates this skepticism. It's not saying you deserve suffering. It's saying that maintaining a state of suffering requires an immense amount of active energy.
Wait. Suffering takes effort.
Think about the fearful actor we talked about. The blaming, the shouting, the replaying old arguments over and over, that is an active expenditure of life force. You are using your strength to limit the everything down to the nothing.
That's a huge reframe. So the abundance is just what happens when you stop blocking it.
Precisely. The instruction is to literally breathe out the lack and breathe in the everything. It's a relaxation of that constriction. The source calls it divine abundance, but you can just think of it as the natural flow of life when you aren't strangling it with fear.
So if we stop strangling the flow, where does that leave us? The final section talks about surrender, and specifically getting off the mountain of compliance.
The mountain of compliance, or the mountain of proving. I think this resonates so deeply with modern work culture. We spend our lives climbing this mountain, trying to prove our worth to parents, bosses, society.
And the source says, just stop climbing.
Because you cannot please everyone. It is a mathematical impossibility. If you are climbing that mountain, you are living in a state of constant deficit. You never arrive.
So if I stop climbing, do I just sit in the dirt? What's the alternative to striving?
The alternative is inviting. Instead of chasing approval, you invite in the people and the opportunities that resonate with who you actually are. This is where you enter the flow state.
And the source promises unexpected surprises here. But again, let's ground this. What kind of surprises are we talking about?
Well, this is the tricky part. The source warns that these gifts might not look like gifts at first. This is appearance versus reality.
Give me an example.
Okay. You might get fired. To the fearful mind, that is a disaster. That is a rock that will crush you.
Right.
But to the conscious mind, the mind that has stopped climbing the mountain of proving, that firing might be the unexpected surprise that frees you from a job that was killing your soul. It's a closed door that forces you toward the open one.
But you have to be in the flow to see it that way. Otherwise, you just panic.
Exactly. If you resist the surprise, it becomes suffering. If you accept the surprise, it becomes transformation.
There's a beautiful line about transforming burdens into light. It sounds very high level, but I want to know how our listener can apply that on a Tuesday afternoon when the kids are screaming and the wifey's down.
It's about the micro moment. You don't have to solve the problem of your life today. You don't have to fix your entire childhood or your financial future in one breath.
Okay.
You just have to transmute the weight of this specific moment.
So the wifey's down. I feel the rage rising.
And you catch it. You hold the remote control. You say, I can breathe out this rage. I can choose not to let a router dictate my internal state. You turn that heavy stone into a manageable pebble. You do it just for right now.
And then you do it again 5 minutes later.
And that builds momentum. That is how you shift from level 190 to level 205. It's inch by inch.
I think that makes this much more approachable. We aren't trying to become enlightened monks overnight. We're just trying to stop the bleeding of our own energy.
We are trying to stop being the victim of our own biology.
So to recap this whole journey, We started with the brain physically shutting down in fear, leading to these endless, shoreless arguments where we try to use logic on people, including ourselves, who are biologically incapable of processing it.
And we move to the solution. The physical act of breathing out the toxin, the mental discipline of picking up the remote control, and the spiritual choice to stop ordering lack from the menu.
It really does come down to attention, doesn't it? The source had that line, secrets don't exist, only closed ears and shut eyes.
That is the takeaway for me. The quality of your experience is determined solely by where you point the camera. If you scan your life looking for problems, you will find an infinite supply. The universe will just keep serving them up.
But if you look for the everything,
you find resources, you find resilience, and you find that sophisticated face of the problem that actually has a solution.
It's a powerful reminder. We spend so much time critiquing the movie of our lives, complaining about the plot twists, yelling at the screen, and we forget we're the projectionist.
Indeed. We forget we have the controls.
I want to leave everyone with the final thought from the text, which I think is a great challenge for the week ahead. The source asks, if you are looking for a problem, you will find it. But if you are watching a play you don't like, remember, why are you still watching when the remote control has been in your hand the entire time?
It's the question that changes everything.
Something to mull over. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Goodbye.